They tore it down while I was gone, not damaged, not loosened, not even half-touched, just gone. Like it had never existed. And the craziest part? They did it like it was nothing, like they had every right in the world. I was only out for a day. That morning had been normal, the kind of normal you don't think twice about. I grabbed my keys, stepped out onto the patio for a second, coffee in hand. Just standing under the pergola I built 2 summers ago, cedar beams, clean lines, nothing fancy, but solid mine. It filtered the sunlight just enough to make the whole space feel like a little escape, you know? Not too bright, not too hot, just right. I remember running my hand along one of the posts before I left, which sounds stupid now, but it mattered to me. I'd spent weekends building that thing, measuring twice, cutting once, arguing with myself over whether to stain it darker or keep it natural. It wasn't just what it was time. By the time I got back that evening, something felt off before I even got out of the car. You ever have that feeling where your brain notices something before you do? Like, the light hits differently, the air feels wrong, the space just doesn't sit right. I stepped out, shut the car door, and just stood there for a second, staring at my backyard. It was too bright. That's the first thing I noticed. Too open. And then it hit me. The pergola was gone. Not broken. Not leaning. Not partially taken down. Gone. I walked closer, slow at first, like maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Like maybe I was just tired. But no. The beams were stacked off to the side like scrap wood. Screws and brackets tossed into a plastic bin. The posts, my posts, cut clean at the base. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense. Okay. What the hell is this? I muttered, stepping over what used to be the center beam. For a second, I thought maybe. I don't know. Maybe the city came through for some emergency. Maybe a storm warning I missed, something official. But there was no notice on my door. No letter in the mailbox. No email. Nothing. Just gone. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry yet, but because my brain kept trying to explain it, like it needed a reason to settle down. And every explanation fell apart the second I looked back out that window. By morning, I had one place in mind. The HOA office. Now, if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know the vibe. Beige walls, fake plants, that faint smell of printer ink and quiet judgment. It's like walking into a place where everything is technically polite, but somehow still tense. Her name was Denise Harper, president of the board. Late 50s, always dressed like she had somewhere more important to be, even when she didn't. I'd met her once before, when I submitted the pergola design, actually. Back then, she was all smiles, and we appreciate homeowners who follow the process. Yeah, that version of her was gone. She was sitting behind the desk when I walked in, glasses low on her nose, flipping through some paperwork like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. Morning, I said. I think someone took apart my pergola yesterday. She didn't even look surprised. Just glanced up, calm as anything. Yes, she said. That was us. Just like that. No hesitation. No apology. Nothing. I blinked. You're saying the HOA came onto my property and removed a structure while I wasn't home? It was non-compliant, she replied, like she was explaining the weather. We acted in accordance with community guidelines. I actually leaned back a little, just trying to process the way she said it. Not defensive, not aggressive, just certain. Non-compliant, I repeated. Since when? She reached into a folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the desk toward me. Violation notice, she said. I picked it up. Dated yesterday. Same day it was removed. I looked back at her. You gave me a violation the same day you removed it? It was an urgent correction. Urgent. I let out a short laugh. It's been standing there for 2 years. She shrugged, just slightly. It came to our attention recently. That was the moment something shifted. Up until then, I was confused, maybe even a little stunned. But right there, right when she said that, something clicked. Because I'd read the bylaws before. Not casually, actually read them. When I built the pergola, I went through every line just to make sure I wouldn't deal with something exactly like this. And I remembered something. Clear as day. You're required to give notice, I said slowly. And a response window. You can't just show up and remove something. She held my gaze for a second, then leaned back in her chair. We determined this required immediate action. There it was again. That certainty. Like the rules only mattered when they wanted them to. I nodded, folded the paper once, and slipped it into my pocket. Okay, I said. That was it. No yelling. No argument. I just turned and walked out. And I swear, I could feel her watching me leave, probably expecting me to come back louder, angrier, ready to fight. But I wasn't. Not yet. Because at that point, I didn't need to argue. I needed to be right. And I had a feeling. I already was. When I got home, I didn't even look at the backyard this time. I went straight inside, pulled out the old file box from the closet, and set it on the kitchen table. If they wanted to play this by the rules, then I was going to play it better. I sat there at my kitchen table for a minute before opening the box, just staring at it, fingers resting on the lid like I already knew what was inside, like I just needed a second to let the frustration settle into something sharper, something useful. Because anger, by itself, doesn't win anything. But proof does. I flipped the lid open. Inside was everything I'd kept from when I built that pergola: printed emails, sketches, receipts, even the original permit application I almost didn't bother saving. I'm not usually that organized, but something about dealing with the HOA back then made me cautious, like I knew someday I might need a paper trail. Turns out, I did. I started sorting through the stack slowly, not rushing it. Every page mattered now. Every date, every signature, every line they couldn't talk their way around later. And then I found it. The approval form. Stamped. Signed. Dated 2 years ago. And right there at the bottom, Denise Harper's signature. I leaned back in my chair and just stared at it for a second, letting that sink in. Okay, I muttered. So now this gets interesting. Because this wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was them breaking their own rules, and hoping I wouldn't notice. I pulled my laptop closer, opened up the HOA bylaws, and started reading again. Not skimming this time, really reading. Line by line, slow and deliberate, like I was building a case in my head. And there it was, buried halfway through the architectural section. Once a structure has been approved, it cannot be penalized or removed unless it has been modified or falls into disrepair. I actually smiled. Not big, just enough. Because mine hadn't changed. Not a single beam, not a single screw. Same design, same placement, same everything. Which meant they had no grounds. None. I grabbed my phone and headed outside. The backyard looked even worse in the daylight. Empty in a way that felt intentional, like someone had erased something they didn't like looking at. The stacked wood, the scattered hardware. It wasn't just removal, it was careless. Disrespectful. I started taking photos. Wide shots first. The whole patio, the open sky where the pergola used to be. Then closer. The cut posts. The screws they'd left behind. Even the little things, like the marks on the concrete where the base plates had been anchored. I crouched down and picked up one of the brackets, turning it over in my hand. Still solid. Still perfectly usable. They didn't remove it because it was unsafe. They removed it because they decided to. And that's a different kind of problem. Inside, I spread everything out across the table, photos on one side, documents on the other, laptop in the middle. It looked less like a home and more like someone preparing for a trial. Which, in a way, I was. I opened a new email, paused for a second, then started typing. Not emotional, not aggressive, just precise. I attached the approval form first, then a few of the photos. Then I wrote, "Good morning. I'm following up regarding the removal of the pergola on my property dated yesterday. Attached is the original approval signed by the HOA, along with documentation confirming that the structure has not been modified since installation. Per Section 4.3 of the HOA bylaws, approved structures cannot be removed or penalized unless altered or deemed unsafe. Neither condition applies here. Additionally, no prior notice or response window was provided, which is required under Section 2.1 before any enforcement action." At the bottom, I added one more line. "I've copied a property attorney on this email for documentation purposes." That was it. No threats. No dramatic language. Just facts, lined up clean. I hit send. And then I waited. The first day, nothing. Second day, around mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed. An email. Short. Careful. "We are currently reviewing the matter and will follow up accordingly." No name at the bottom. Just HOA board. I read it twice, then set the phone down. That tone, that shift, it told me everything I needed to know. They were no longer certain. And that's when you know you've got them. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. No calls. No letters. No one showing up. Just silence. But it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. This one felt loaded, like something was moving behind the scenes. I kept going about my routine, but I noticed things. Neighbors slowing down when they walked past. A couple of them asking, casually, "Hey, what happened to your patio cover?" I kept it simple. HOA took it down. That alone was enough to get a reaction. Raised eyebrows. Little head shakes. Because people talk, and HOAs, whether they admit it or not, care about that. On the 5th day, I ran into Mark. He lives 2 houses down. Retired, always out front messing with his lawn like it's a full-time job. He leaned on his rake when he saw me. "Hey," he said, "you push back on that." I nodded. "Yeah." He smirked a little. "Good. They've been getting a little bold lately." That stuck with me. A little bold, meaning this probably wasn't the first time. Which made me wonder, how many people just let it go? How many people didn't have the paperwork, or the time, or the patience to fight back? And how many times did that make the board feel like they could do whatever they wanted? By day 7, I almost forgot about it. Not completely, but enough that it wasn't sitting at the front of my mind every second. And then I heard it. The sound of a truck pulling into my driveway early that morning. Heavy tires on concrete. Doors shutting. Voices. I stepped outside, still holding my coffee, and there it was, a flatbed truck, stacked with fresh lumber. New brackets. Boxes of hardware. 3 guys unloading like they had a schedule to keep. I just stood there for a second, watching. One of them looked over. "You the homeowner?" "Yeah." He nodded. "We're here to rebuild the pergola." Just like that. No explanation. No discussion. Just action. I took a sip of my coffee, trying not to smile too much. "Same design?" I asked. "Exactly the same," he said. "That's what's on the order." Of course it was. I stepped back, leaned against the doorframe, and watched them work. And I'll be honest, there was something deeply satisfying about it. Not just because they were fixing it, but because they had to. Because the same system that tried to push me around had rules. And those rules didn't bend just because someone in charge felt like it. By the afternoon, the frame was already going up. Clean cuts, fresh wood, even better alignment than before. I walked out at one point, ran my hand along one of the new beams, same as I had that morning a week ago. Felt familiar, but different. Because this time, it wasn't just something I built. It was something I defended. And that changes how it feels. By sunset, it was done. Standing there again, casting that same soft shade across the patio like nothing had ever happened. Only now it meant more. A lot more. And the strangest part? I never heard from Denise again. No apology. No explanation. No follow-up. Just silence. Like the whole thing had been quietly erased. But it hadn't. Not for me. Because now I knew exactly how far they were willing to go, and exactly what it took to stop them. For a while, things went back to normal, at least on the surface. The pergola stood there like it always had, casting that same soft shade across the patio, the light filtering through the slats in that way I'd gotten so used to I almost forgot it was ever gone. If you walked by, you'd never know anything had happened. But I knew. Every time I stepped outside, every time I set my coffee down on that table, every time the afternoon sun hit just right, I remembered exactly what it looked like when it wasn't there. And more than that, I remembered how easily someone thought they could take it. That part didn't sit right with me. Not in a loud, angry way. Just this quiet awareness that once something like that happens, you don't really go back to being unaware. You start noticing things you didn't before. Like how often the HOA drove through the neighborhood. Like how certain houses seemed to get more attention than others. Like how people lowered their voices just a little when they talked about the board, like it wasn't worth the trouble to say things out loud. A couple weeks later, I saw Denise again. Not at the office. At the grocery store. And it caught me off guard more than I expected. She was in the produce section, standing there comparing apples like she didn't have a care in the world. Same posture, same calm expression, like nothing had ever happened. For a second, I considered just walking past her, letting it go. But something in me said no, not out of spite, not even out of anger, just because unfinished things have a way of sticking around longer than they should. So I walked up. "Denise." She looked up, and there it was, that flicker of recognition, followed immediately by that same controlled expression she always wore. "Oh," she said. "Hi." We stood there for a second, the hum of the store filling the space between us. "I assume you've seen the pergola," I said. She nodded once. "Yes. It's been resolved." Resolved. That word again. Like it was a scheduling conflict, not something they initiated without notice on someone else's property. I tilted my head slightly. That's one way to put it. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she adjusted the apples in her hand, like she needed something to do. We reviewed the documentation, she said. There were discrepancies. Discrepancies, I repeated. You mean you were wrong? That landed. Not loudly, but enough. She looked at me then, really looked this time, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't seem completely in control of the moment. It's not always that simple, she said. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh. No, it actually is, I said. You had the approval. You skipped the notice. You removed something you weren't allowed to touch. I paused, then added a little quieter. And you did it while I wasn't home. That part mattered. Because whether she admitted it or not, that choice said something. Her jaw tightened just slightly. We act in the best interest of the community, she said. There it was. The justification. The umbrella statement that makes everything sound reasonable, even when it isn't. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. That's what everyone says, right before they stop listening to the people who actually live in it. That hung there for a second. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just honest. She didn't argue. Didn't defend it further. Just gave a small nod, like she'd decided the conversation wasn't going anywhere she wanted it to go. Well, she said, I'm glad it's been taken care of. And just like that, she turned and walked away. No apology. Still, I watched her go, standing there between stacks of fruit and fluorescent lights, and I realized something I hadn't fully put into words yet. She didn't think she was wrong. Not really. Maybe she understood the technical mistake, the paperwork, the bylaws, the parts she couldn't argue anymore. But the decision itself, the mindset behind it, that part was still intact. And that's the part that sticks with you. Because it means it can happen again. Maybe not to me, but to someone. Someone who doesn't keep every email. Someone who doesn't read the fine print. Someone who just assumes, like I used to, that the rules are applied fairly because they're written down. That was probably the biggest shift for me. Not the pergola. Not even the rebuild. It was the realization that systems like that don't really rely on fairness. They rely on how much you're willing to push back. And if you don't, they just keep going. A few days after that, Mark stopped by while I was out back. He leaned against the fence, looking up at the pergola. Looks better than before, he said. Yeah, I replied. It is. He nodded. Heard they've been real quiet lately. I smirked a little. Funny how that works. He chuckled, then added. You probably saved a few people some trouble, you know. Maybe. Or maybe I just got lucky that I had what I needed when it mattered. Either way, I wasn't the same guy who walked out that door a few weeks earlier without thinking twice. Now I double-check things. I keep records. I pay attention. Not out of paranoia, just awareness. Because once you see how things can go, you don't really unsee it. And that pergola? It's still standing. Same size. Same design. But every time I look at it, I don't just see wood and screws anymore. I see a line that got crossed, and then drawn back. They thought they could take it down, so I made them build it back. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. Was that justice? Or was that just me knowing how to play the game better than they expected? Because not everyone gets that chance. Not everyone catches it in time. And not everyone wins when they push back. So I'm curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have gone further? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, or anything like it, I want to hear your story too. Because I've got a feeling this kind of thing happens more than people realize. And yeah, if you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, you know the deal. I'll see you in the next one.